What were your thoughts of wanting the medical record?
I wanted to know exactly what had happened from the time the accident happened to the time that she had passed away.
You just needed to know that.
Yes.
You weren't there.
I wasn't there. I didn't get to go to the scene. I didn't get to see her car.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to know
Mm-hmm.
what happened and what they did to try to save her.
Mm-hmm. And so when we spoke on the phone, I gave you the option of that. Certainly you had the right to the chart.
Yeah.
But that another option was the idea of a grief conference and bringing together different members of the care team that took care of Kylie that day. And you thought that was something you wanted to do.
Yes.
Right. And so you and Kylie's boyfriend attended.
Yes.
And at the time you said your husband just didn't need that. You were coping in different manners. And
Yes. My husband, Bruce, had talked to the local fire department and rescue squad,
mm-hmm.
and they had told him what had happened, and he was okay with what they had told him. He didn't need to know any further details. He knew that she had passed away due to a severe head trauma,
mm-hmm.
and he was okay with that.
Okay.
I, on the other hand, had way too many questions
Mm-hmm.
and needed somebody to explain it to me.
Sure. So it's clear that people can grieve in different ways.
Yes.
And as the mother, at that moment, you needed to know more details than maybe her father needed to know.
Yes.
Okay. So we offered that to you, and you accepted.
Yes.
And then I gathered people from each area,
Mm-hmm.
including the paramedic from the scene,
Yes.
who was there with Kylie at the scene. Mike was his name. And then a representative from the emergency room, the physician from the emergency room, and then, of course, Melissa was there. She was Kylie's nurse in the intensive care and part of the trauma team. And we also brought in a chaplain. The chaplain that had been there with you was not available or wasn't here any longer, so we brought another chaplain just to have a spiritual person there as well. And so in the beginning of the care conference, or while you and I talked, I offered to you if you'd like to bring in pictures
Mhm.
of Kylie. What did that do for you?
That gave me a chance to show everybody who Kylie was. That she was, this really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted them to see her not the way they saw her that night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was important for me for them to just maybe get a feel.
Mm-hmm. And know her, the real her. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that made a huge impact on the staff, seeing her and getting to know her through your eyes rather than as a trauma patient.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So that was helpful to you.
It was.
Mm-hmm. Tell me what else you think about with the grief conference that was helpful to you.
Well, for me, I really wanted to know when the paramedics got there, what they did, how they cared for her, how they handled her.
Mm-hmm.
And it was important to know that they treated her with respect
Mm-hmm.
and kindness.
Mm-hmm.
So to hear Mike
Mm-hmm.
tell me, that he picked her up and how he handled her and how he brushed her hair out of her face and really looked at her
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that this was a beautiful young person. Those were things that a mom, me especially, needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with everybody else that was in that room and the role that they played. I needed to hear it again, even though things were explained to me as they were happening that night.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to hear it again and just know what everybody did and how she was treated and why.
Mm-hmm. So you needed to hear that she was treated as a person
Yes.
by compassionate, caring people.
Yes.
And you shared with me that you felt that after the grief conference.
Yes.
So that we know that that doesn't take away your grief, but did it enable you to not have to worry about that?
Yes. I had, at least in that aspect, I felt a sense of peace. That I didn't have all these questions floating in my head anymore. That the questions that I did have, somebody explained to me and told me, why they couldn't do this, or, why this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things that I needed to know. Otherwise, I would have always asked myself, well, would have, or how come, or did they try this?
Mm-hmm. And so by going through it again, and we went through it purposefully in a chronological order.
Yes.
Is that helpful to you?
Yes.
That by going through it again allowed you to interject with questions of what about this? Or I know a big one for you was she crying out at the scene?
Mm-hmm.
And you needed to hear that she wasn't,
Right.
or hoped to hear that.
Yes.
And Mike could give you that comfort and peace.
Yes.
So the grief conference, interestingly, we found a huge response from the staff that attended, that they felt relieved to see you, and that you were okay on some level, not that your grief was resolved, but that you
Right.
were standing,
Mm-hmm.
which at the time probably is all you could do. And they found that it really helped them in their own grief, because often I think care providers aren't recognized as having grief and sadness when a patient dies that they've been with, even if a short time like Kylie, or days or months as it can be with other patients. And so we wanted to come back together to talk about that, the benefits of the care conference, not only for the family but also for the care providers. So did you feel that the care providers had some grief? Did that surprise you?
I do remember specifically Melissa, who was with me the night of Kylie's accident, and she was truly wonderful, and I thank you. But I remember when I was on the phone with Madison in reference to the organ donation, and I remember her holding my hand, and as I was crying and trying to answer questions, so was she. And that just says a lot to me, that, when you are with, and when I looked around at these people and when they were talking to me, that they truly felt a sense of sadness